Hi, my name's Imogen Blood, and in this episode of Change Talk, I'm joined by Gail Gregory and Damian Murphy of Innovations in Dementia. Innovations in Dementia promotes the rights of people with dementia and works alongside them to shape services. But perhaps most importantly, it creates opportunities for people living with dementia to come together, share their experiences, have fun, and make new friendships. We wanted to record this podcast for people who've just been diagnosed with dementia or people who fear they may be developing it and their family members to show them that there is hope of a life still to be lived. We also want to show services and policymakers what difference it makes when people living with dementia are included in designing and delivering training, strategies, and service design. Okay, fantastic. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to Change Talk today Gail Gregory and Damian Murphy. Thanks so much for coming along. Do you want to say a little bit about yourselves? Great. Gail, should we come to you first?
I'm Gail, and I used to live a very busy life looking after family and running my own business, which was a personalised teddy bear business, until I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in 2019. And now, well, yes, things have changed, but I live the best life I can. And try to remain positive through this chapter in my life.
Absolutely. Seems like you still live a pretty busy life by most people's standards, Gail.
Oh, I do.
We'll come on to that in a moment. Damien, welcome. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks, Imogen. Great to be here. I'm Damian Murphy. Our background many years ago was as a learning disability nurse, but I spent the last maybe, God, blimey, 20 odd, 30 years working in the field of dementia, and I'm part of an organisation called Innovations in Dementia, and we work alongside people living with dementia throughout the UK.
Fantastic. And we'll come back to talk a little bit more about innovations in dementia and what you do and what that looks like. But I guess we just wanted to jump straight in by thinking a little bit about people who might have just been diagnosed with dementia or are perhaps just starting to worry that they might have it. And we really wanted to just hear a little bit about what some of your thoughts would be. What advice would you give to somebody in that position? I'll come to you, Gail, first.
It is a worrying time when you're going through that dementia diagnosis because it's all uncertain. You don't know what's really going to come out of it. But if you do get a dementia diagnosis, for me, I'd say don't hide away just because you've got that diagnosis. You're not going to instantly change just because that consultant's given you the diagnosis. Because when you went into that room, you come out the same person. You're not going to instantly change. And I just treat it now as a new chapter. Yeah, I've lost things that I can't do, but when you think about it, there's still lots of things that you can do. I know where I used to embroider teddy bears, and when I got to the stage where I couldn't understand the embroidery machine and the programs on the computer, of course I was upset about it. I'm only human. So, it does get to you and you think, oh, goodness me, I've lost something else. But I think it's one of them things where you've just got to move on and you've got to try and find something else to do. And I think for me now, I've accepted that diagnosis. And I think that's a big thing. You've got to accept it and you've got to adapt. And I think once you've accepted and you can adapt, you move on. And it is a process of adapting all the time, which I am doing now. But it's just finding things to do and getting a little bit of purpose back into your life. I found crafts and art, and now that's what I do. I'm either outside with my camera, walking the dogs, or I'm inside doing arts and crafts, and it gives you something to do, and it just gives you a little boost. Yeah, so keep going.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great advice. And what would you say? I mean, you talked about arts and crafts, Gail. I mean, what would you say has kind of helped you most? How did you, I mean, it sounds like you're the sort of person that, you have a lot of strength and you made that decision to adapt. But what would you say helped you through that journey? What's helped you the most?
Yeah, I think, like you say, strengths. Yeah, I think it depends on what sort of a person you are. And I'm not one to sit back and do nothing because I wasn't ready to give up. I've still got lots of things to do. And I got my diagnosis just before lockdown. And when we went into lockdown, obviously, there was just nothing. There was nothing out there. You're locked in your home and there's nothing to do. And so I started searching on the internet because I have to keep going. I have to keep this going. That's what it's all about. And I found deep groups and innovations in dementia. And I was on social media and there was, I think it was a conference of some sort where there were people coming together and I just joined it. I signed up and joined it. And then I thought, these people seem very friendly. So I got involved in little deep groups here and there online. And there was an art one which I got involved in with Francis, who learnt us how to paint. And I'd never painted before. Wow. My art teacher said I was useless and I should drop the subject. And Francis sort of encouraged me. You can do it, you can do it. I kept saying, I can't. And there were a few of us joined and we really surprised ourselves. And it's that peer support of coming together and being together. And whilst we was doing art, we were sharing little stories and complaining about our dementia and, things like this and, what your husband had said or what your partner were doing. And it's just wonderful to get together. And we did all sorts. And I think it was the peer support of getting together with others, especially through lockdown, that got me through and give me more confidence, really.
Wow, that's amazing. And there's something really powerful, isn't there, about doing an activity together? Sometimes it can be a bit daunting if you're going to go to like a group and talk about your dementia. That's not comfortable for everyone, is it? But when you're sitting there, like you say, doing whatever it is you're enjoying doing or something new or something you're struggling to do even, you're there with other people. It sounds like a perfect situation to get chatting.
It is really, because for me, I do struggle walking into a group. Whereas when you're online, you're in the comfort of your own home. You've got your security around you. And I think that makes a big difference as well. I could talk for England on here, but put me in a room with some people who I didn't know, I'd just go into the corner of the room and I wouldn't speak most probably. So it makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, there'll be others feel the other way round. So it's important you've got a mix, isn't it? Yeah. Damian, I know you've done lots of work over the years with couples who are going on this journey. And I suppose I just wondered, I mean, Gail touched on that kind of, chatting about your partners and your relationships while you're there doing your painting. I just wondered what your thoughts were from that experience of trying to support partners. Around what advice would you give to those partners or family members of a person living with dementia or someone who's just been diagnosed, perhaps?
I think the key message really when you're working with couples or any family, family dynamic is that message that it's nobody's fault. I think for many years, a stress and burden model has prevailed, and it sort of implies blame on the person with dementia. I've never felt that's fair, really. No, nobody's asked that. Nobody's deliberately, oh, I'm going to go out and get dementia. And that I think there is that. It's about seeing the potential and the possibilities. And as Gail says, those opportunities for peer support, things like activities or gatherings, they're a vehicle for people to connect. And likewise for couples. And what I found with couples, maybe where they are in a bit of a sort of a rut, and there is that sort of, bit of a standoff and there's antagonisms with, silly sort of correcting each other and all that sort of stuff. And I found that sort of giving people the opportunity to hear other people with dementia speak makes care partners think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe my partner's got something to say, or I maybe should listen to them more rather than just treat them as background noise, and vice versa, of course. And and I think that message of getting people to talk to each other rather than offload elsewhere is really important, because I think telepathy is overrated.
Yeah, yeah. You need a bit of both, don't you? It's good to have an opportunity to let some steam off with other partners or indeed with other people living with dementia. But you're right. Having that, actually kind of addressing some of these things full on, I guess. It takes courage, doesn't it? But yeah, Gail, do you have any sort of thoughts on that from your own experiences?
Yeah, the thing is, we don't have a crystal ball, do we? And this is the main thing. And for me, it's about talking and opening up with each other. Because, like I say, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what each other are thinking. And it's no good bottling things up, because all it does is fester away. And then in the end, you get an explosion and a volcano, and then that's it. So it's all about, talking. And I think as well for me, I do feel guilty for having dementia sometimes, and I suppose that's only natural, because it wasn't the life that I thought that we was going to have when we retired, and obviously I had to retire early, but by talking and to your husband, to your children, to your parents, by talking and getting things out, it does give you that chance to offload, and it makes you feel better. And so all I can say is keep talking to one another, because it does help.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's something, isn't there? I mean, I've heard people getting really frustrated with family members who around sort of remembering bits of factual information or taking it very personally when the person just gets suddenly can't think of the name, or and it I guess we've got to give each other some slack, haven't we? Those are the very things that this condition impacts on, I guess. So people end up taking things personally, I think, sometimes, and can create a lot of rope burn and a lot of stress if we're pushing against each other. And I think sometimes we've got to, like your philosophy is very much about, we've got to enjoy what we have got, and be present in those moments, and not fight with each other over the things that might be difficult some days. Yeah, really important. I'm just wondering whether there are, like, obviously, you've talked about your journey, Gail, and sort of early onset dementia, and that kind of some of those stages of how you've adapted. I just wondered whether there are, like, different messages perhaps for people at different stages of their dementia journey, perhaps people who are at a more advanced stage, or really, do you think what you've just said kind of applies throughout the whole journey? I don't know.
I think it's very difficult to give messages from my perspective of different stages in dementia, because everybody's dementia is going to be different. Yeah. Everybody's chapter is going to be different. So what my symptoms are to somebody else's symptoms will be totally different. There will be similarities, but they're all different. And I think at the moment for me, I'm doing pretty well. I mean, I'm talking to you today, but I have got a shed load of notes behind me to just jog my memory because it does go every now and again. But yeah, there's going to be changes all the time, and I suppose every day is different, and it's just go with the flow. And that's what you've got to do, really. It's go with the flow, because you don't know, today might be a good day, tomorrow might be a really bad day. So you've just got to go with it, I think. Yeah. Don't fight it, just go with it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Damian, and your thoughts, because obviously, as you mentioned at the start, you've worked as a professional in this kind of world. You've met lots of different people with dementia at all sorts of different stages of very different journeys. What are your thoughts on that question?
It's really interesting. There's a couple of angles really in terms of talking about stages. I've always found that difficult because, if you get run over by a bus tomorrow or if you die the next day, oh, it's clearly end stage. But I would say that certainly people's dependency changes, and there'll also be people, who, if they've been diagnosed with dementia and had that huge blow to confidence, as Gail mentioned, and haven't had opportunity to meet maybe with peers, you get a lot of that sort of self-limiting element, that withdrawal, and the impact of dementia itself, which makes people sort of withdraw and have this great sense of apathy and just want to stay in bed all day on many occasions. And often I think they're missed opportunities, which is really sad. And I think that can sort of almost hasten, obviously, people's decline, the depression and lack of activity, lack of engagement. Many people ask us, that question, how long have I got?
Mm.
You can never answer that, but we always sort of tend to say you've got a lot longer if you stay engaged and connected. Um, and and just as Gail said, you don't suddenly change from one day to the next from your diagnosis. That's one of the messages we often give to people. You've got probably about 100 billion nerve cells in your brain. And if this is about death of nerve cells, you're not going to lose them all at once.
Mm.
And many people say, well, I've got plenty in reserve. Life goes on, so let's keep going. And I think that's a message that is often missing around that time of diagnosis. And sometimes people never get that message. Um, that's not to say things don't really get difficult physically, cognitively, as things progress. And, absolutely, we've got to acknowledge the stresses and strains and what that brings to all parties concerned. And I think more than anything, it's always about just tapping into recognizing that pain, that frustration, those elements. Um, particularly if you've got people maybe labeled as having no insight or resistant to or non-compliant, all these sorts of labels that put the blame on people. I think really that says a lot about the effort people are going to try to cover up
Yeah.
and indicates really how probably terrified they are within themselves. And I think what I found really helped over the years is to acknowledge and say, look, gosh, it must be really difficult for you to feel you're on your toes within your own home where you should be more relaxed, or that you feel maybe people are trying to catch you out or correct you. That's not fair, is it? And when I say that to people, you can visibly see the guard drop, you can visibly see the relief, and hang on a minute, this is, yeah, absolutely, it's not just me and it's not my fault and I've got rights. And so more and more, we just try to broaden the platform for people to come together with dementia across the UK, but and have those conversations with each other, with peers. When we gather as peers, we recognise everyone's a teacher and everyone's a learner. And Gail, I'm sure you recognise lots of sort of Me Too moments when you meet other people with dementia. And go, oh yeah, I thought it was just me. And another angle was we were visited actually by a Japanese documentary crew
Wow.
just last month in York with our group Minds and Voices, which is a peer group in York, and by a chap called Tomo, who's very famous in Japan and big in Japan, and he'd been 10 years previous and had met us. And he came back to ask that question around how do you cope and what helps with the as dementia advances and how things get difficult. Obviously, some members of the group were no longer with us, and we recognized them and we spoke about the loss, but the tracks that they'd left and the relationships that people had created were still quite enriching for them. But, he asked that question, and what we discovered that at every stage, people were saying, yeah, but you still need to be amongst your peers. You still need to what really helps is people who understand you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was what was really striking, that actually it's the same all the way along the journey.
Absolutely. And that adaptation that you spoke so powerfully about, Gail, at the start of, around the time of your diagnosis and following it is exactly what you're describing there. People adapting, people kind of whether they're adapting it because they don't want people to know what's, that they're in that kind of stage of trying to trying to still keep things going and not admit that there are problems, or whether they're adapting and through those different stages. You see that kind of theme, don't you, all the way through?
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I think the end stage is more difficult, and for me now, I was diagnosed with dementia, and then my dad was diagnosed with dementia a couple of years after. So my dad's only been living with dementia a few years, but he's gone into the later stages quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the misconceptions of dementia, because early onset, where we're diagnosed early, we don't always sort of, can't think of the word, yes, it's gone now. We don't deteriorate as quick as what we would do if we was diagnosed later on in life, because later on in life we most probably be living with it for longer than we think anyway.
Yeah.
And again, it's accepting and going to the doctors and getting that diagnosis. But I see now, from a carer's point of view as well, the struggles that people have looking after somebody in the later stages. And I sometimes think, I suppose it's easy for me to say because I'm not physically doing it all the time, but it's about listening to that person as well and going into their world, because they're in a different world. They're in their world. And if you try and take them out of that world, you're only going to create agitation. And so if they think they've got a letter from the Queen, they've got a letter from the Queen. Don't start saying to them, oh, don't be stupid, you haven't, because that's where you get the problems, and that's where you get the agitation, and that's where you get the conflict. And if you went along with it, like you would with a child, if they're doing role play, you would go along with that child. So go along with the person, because it must make them feel better if you believe and you go into their world.
Yeah, I think that's really, really, really valuable advice. I can relate to that, thinking about my relationship with my own mother, who's, doesn't have dementia, but she's had very significant cognitive impairment after a stroke. And I think, yeah, sometimes you've just got to run with it, haven't you, really?
You
and
have.
those are often when we have our best times together, I'm slightly kind of chuckling internally, but it's often the best times. I suppose I'm just reflecting as you're both talking. I mean, obviously, there's been some real doom and gloom PR, hasn't there, about dementia? And I I understand, of course, charities need to raise funds, and sometimes, the way they think to do that is to kind of scare everybody, but there's obviously been some really very hard-hitting commercials out there, adverts out there, haven't there, about the impact which dementia can have. I just wondered what impact do you think that has on all of us, really, but particularly on people living with dementia or worrying that they might have it?
For me, it's the negativity and that's upsetting, and it's also the stereotypes that they're creating something that's not true in my eyes. They're doing it to bring money in and not to help the people that's living with dementia. The thing is, it's like I've said before, you don't instantly change when you get that diagnosis. We're not going to instantly go to that end stages. And I think when these adverts are put out there, they jump to that end stage that, oh, my mum can't do anything now. She can't dress how she used to dress. Well, I'm sorry. I dress the same way as I did when I got my diagnosis, and I will carry on doing so because that's me.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not helping the stigma against dementia at all. It's just, it's just making everything seem doom and gloom all the time around dementia. And it's not all doom and gloom, because we still have a life and we can still live. And I think that is the thing that they should be saying. We can live and we do enjoy ourselves. Yes, we laugh.
Absolutely. And that's what really prompted us to make this together, isn't it? That we just wanted to get some of those messages out. I know, Damian, you've been quite vocal about that on kind of social media, about some of the, how dementia gets portrayed. I don't know whether you want to add any further thoughts on that, any other
Just to reiterate, really, that what Gail has said, it's such a shame, really, that people will continue to be painted as sort of passive recipients of care, as a burden, and not having anything to offer. And people complain about sort of services are stretched. Nobody really hitherto has properly tapped into the resources of people with dementia themselves and their partners and their families in terms of helping shape services or putting out a message or sort of being able to offer learning and development opportunities or lead, and many people do lead their own peer groups, and and lead their own research sort of
Mhm.
projects, which we've supported groups to do. So there's huge untapped potential then for it to be painted as just you're just a burden
Mm.
is really sad, and I think has undone a lot of work and then a lot of the narrative we've tried to sort of shift really over the years. It's not to ignore and sugarcoat stuff.
No.
Absolutely, we absolutely recognise the reality, and but at time of diagnosis, and Wendy was in our group, and groups that we work with in East Yorkshire, we helped shape the local 5-year dementia strategy, which is called "Hope of a Life to be Lived," which is a phrase that Wendy, when she gave a small talk at the very first workshop of putting that strategy together, she said, "Look, we don't want the doom and gloom or exclusively doom and gloom. We know it's a bummer of a diagnosis," was the phrase she always used to say, "but we also want hope of a life still to be lived."
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's such an important message, isn't it? And I think that point about the untapped resource is just, yeah, really, really frustrating, isn't it? Given what need our services are, how much need our services are of being sort of, shaken up and rethought radically. I just wondered on that, Gail, I don't know, in terms of, your kind of any messages that you might have for people working in health or social care, housing, paid carers. I don't know, what do they need to be doing? Anyone that's listening to this, what might they do to help be more effective in their work and their support of people?
This should be involving the people that live with dementia,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, we are the experts, we are living with it. And we can give them so much information, so much valuable information that they can use and go forward with.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that would take us away from the stigma as well, because they'd be using people and working with people that are living with dementia. And I think that's the only way that we can move forward is by educating. It's the educating of people, and who better to do it but the people that's living with.
Mm. Absolutely. It becomes about us, doesn't it, then, rather than them? It's not a group of people over there. It's about us. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, Damian, do you want to say a little bit more? I mean, around sort of, I mean, you touched there on kind of training that organizations might be giving to their workforces. I mean, what are your thoughts around, how that might be reinvigorated and vastly improved? What does that look like? What,
Well, as Gail said, I would say, well, have that training and that learning really led by and involved by people with dementia. They've got a huge capacities because who better to learn from than those who've been there and got the t-shirt. And that message really that to say take the lead if you're a service provider or if you're an educator, take the lead from people with dementia. What is it that people with dementia want you to know if you're looking after them? What is it that people with dementia want their family to know? What is it that staff want to know? What is it that families want to know? So there's a whole cohort of different learners. I think in terms of training, it's often thought, yeah, we've got to train staff, put staff through mandatory this, that, and the other. But that's only one cohort of people who need to learn. People themselves with dementia need to learn. They've got all those unanswered questions. Families, care partners too. And you know, and if we, instead of sort of putting through people through sort of a production line of training to tick CQC boxes, instead, how about creating a whole learning culture constantly? It's a fascinating area to work in, and you can tap into people's area of fascination and whether they've just joined working in a care home as a youngster or whether they've been doing it for years, they'll have their own little charisma and their own areas of where they really want to delve deeper and give people those opportunities to explore. And often I would say almost every time you can involve people with dementia in putting those trainings and delivering those trainings together.
Yeah, absolutely. Really. And everybody using their lived experience. Lots of that workforce will have personal experience, won't they? Or they'll go
Yeah.
on to have personal experience. And, the more we can kind of spread these messages and build this kind of community of people that are listening to each other and really understanding these messages, it feels like we can, over time, make some real changes. I was struck, yeah, just as you were talking about, people working in this workforce with a range of different skills and interests, Damian. I was struck by, I was just thinking back to you talking about your arts and crafts scale a bit earlier, and just thinking, so I've been involved in as a researcher in looking at lots of different arts and crafts-based projects that have been working with people at all stages of the dementia journey, and I've seen and heard what an impact that can have on people. I think you were telling me that you'd been into a care home and been involved in some work on this. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, we this was during in lockdown, and it was with Innovations in Dementia. There was about, I think, 6 or 8 of us that got involved with this craft group, and we was called the Dementia Craftivisms, and we did all sorts, and we used to get together, and each of us would share as crafts and do little bits of things, and then they decided that we're going to care homes, and what a difference that made. I was absolutely gobsmacked. It was heartwarming and emotional and everything else that went with it, because we were in lockdown, so these people in the care homes had not seen anybody. So we're on a big screen, and I did some card making and one thing and another, and me and Francis then did a little book, and which was art and drawing. But what we found from that was, because everybody was all together in a room, and we had colours on the table, and we were drawing flowers, and we was asking them what the favourite holidays were, the favourite car, the favourite dress, and everything just opened up. And it was just amazing to watch these people interact with one another, and with the carers that was there, and the people working in the care homes, and all coming together. And what we got from that is that because they was talking to one another quite openly and quite freely, doing a craft, they was getting lots of information that nobody even knew about. What they did as a child, what was the favourite colour was, and it was and it was just a really good project. It really was. And everybody that was that took part in this said how wonderful it was. There were people went in doing poetry and all sorts, and it was a real heartwarming, lovely thing to be involved in with Innovations in Dementia.
That's just music to my ears. I've always been a passionate believer that, the arts has got to be part of a real transformation of care services. We spend far too long just looking at what people can't do and how we can rush in and, in a very task-based way meet those needs. But what you've described there is a real whole person, strengths-based kind of view, isn't it? And what a difference it makes. I've seen people's eyes light up who've been just sitting ignored in a corner for far too long, and like you say, your memories and all sorts of that, the person just kind of reigniting. Really, it's so powerful.
Yeah, it is very powerful. And it was through, as I've said before, getting together in the deep groups and Innovations in Dementia, bringing everybody together and doing the arts and poetry. And there was all little bits of things that everybody came together doing. And it gives you a sense of purpose as well. And it was so lovely, because there were people going, oh, well, I can't do that. And I was one of them. I hold my hand up and say, I was one that was going, oh, I can't do that. No, I don't want to have a go at that. And when you did, and you got into it, now, I've been doing pieces of art for commission pieces of art, and I'm not an artist. I was told that I was rubbish.
Sounds like you are, Gail.
It's just, so it brings things out of you. And this is what I say, when you've got a dementia diagnosis, there are things still in there that need to come out. You just need to find them so that you can bring enjoyment and life again. And you can do it.
New skills, absolutely. Damian, tell me a little bit more then. Obviously, Gail, you've touched quite a lot on all different bits of work that Innovations in Dementia have been doing and how you've been involved in it. Damian, I know you've told us a little bit about how you gave us an example there about how Innovations in Dementia were involved in helping one area to develop its strategy. Tell us a little bit more about what Innovations in Dementia is all about, really, Damian. What's your kind of mission, really, and what kinds of things do you do?
I always just say working alongside people with dementia, but I think Gail's put the meat on the bones of that with
Mm,
such as giving examples of various projects.
mm,
Certainly the biggest sort of piece of work I suppose we're associated with is the Deep Network, which is
mm,
a network of about 100 independent groups of peer groups of people with dementia scattered around the country. So, there's about 1,000 people in conversation around the UK at any one time that you can tap into, and another example, I suppose, it's about including people and bringing people with dementia at the heart and start of everything and getting providers to do that. And we've got quite a long-standing commission with East Riding of Yorkshire Council we've been working on. And one of the main things, our starting point was with what we call the Good Life with Dementia program,
mm,
which is creating with local people with dementia a new course that they put together and they deliver themselves to peers more recently diagnosed.
oh, right.
So it's a course for people with dementia by people with dementia. And we start afresh each time because it's new in each area. And we've gone around the county. We've done about a dozen of them, over the last few years. And what's happened is it's a course that doesn't stand alone. It doesn't leave you with another cliff edge.
Mm,
It's because it then creates a bunch of engaged, interested individuals who want to carry on meeting. So we've created a local peer network across East Yorkshire, and that resulted in a big gathering at Beverley Racecourse last summer of about 50 odd people with dementia who were always there but had never met before. I'd never had any access to any groups, and we had a massive sort of conference and put the meat on the bones of the dementia strategy we'd helped put together ourselves in terms of practical examples of how people with dementia can. That was the title of the gathering. But these courses, they don't stand alone. They create this peer group who then get involved in leading training, awareness raising. We've got a session called engaging in everyday situations with people. And it's me doing it, and two or three people from some of the groups giving a chat, having a bit of a parky type interview, talking about life with dementia. And it blows people away. It's really simple stuff, but it's been really effective. And plus, as Gail mentioned about the idea of purpose, that sense of purpose, that sense of agency amongst the guys themselves, it's just joyful to see, and people are saying, well, I'm leading this and I put this together and I'm in charge of that. It's fantastic. And so it sort of just snowballs really, because then you open a dialogue and you keep that local conversation going. And the group are now seen as very much as a resource. I was talking about people not being seen as a resource. I think across East Yorkshire, we've really got got to that point where people with dementia and their supporters are now seen as very much as a resource in terms of shaping local services, auditing, reviewing, creating new services as well. So yeah.
wow, that's great. That's such a different way of viewing the sort of dementia strategy and the dementia services, isn't it? To start
Mm.
with building those relationships and hearing those voices and leading the whole thing from starting with those communities. It's revolutionary, isn't it, in lots of ways compared to what we see in other areas. It sounds simple, but it often doesn't work that way, does it? It's
Mm.
the medics and the kind of organizational leaders decide what's going to happen, and then it kind of runs its way down. But this is a really different, really, you've described it as a new paradigm, I think, and it
Yeah, I mean, it's very fancy language, isn't
just
it?
sounds posh,
I'm
but
just glad that East Riding listened
yeah,
and said, "How
yeah.
about this?" And they said, "Yeah, well, let's try it." And it's worked, which has been great. And for so often people have said, "Well, we've had services designed for us by people without dementia and expecting us to fit in." Well, and they wonder why we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got the area and the leaders in it have got to be open and up for adapting and listening and acting, haven't they, on
Yeah.
people's voices as well. Gail, I just, to bring you back in on that, I just, yeah, hearing about these new groups of people, the new relationships that are built there. I just wondered in terms of, your own kind of journey in that. It sounds like you've met lots of new people along the way. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Oh yes, I've met lots of people, and each and every one of them are so inspiring because we've all got a story to tell. And I think it's just wonderful to come together because we can share our stories with one another. And we do build friendships. And when I got my diagnosis, it's funny because you get your dementia diagnosis and immediately people start dropping off and you stop your friends stop ringing you, they stop calling round, they don't want to go out for a brew with you anymore, because I think they're frightened of what they've got to say to you, and they don't have to change, because I haven't changed, I'm still the same person. But then when you get talking to people in these dementia groups, you've got people there that understand, they've got a better understanding of dementia because they're going through it themselves. And you make new friends. And so I have lots of new friends now, mainly all online, but I don't care where they are because they're friends that understand me. So, you know, but it is, and it's through the groups that have got us together, and it's through those groups that have connected people. And I think that is wonderful, that all these people that are all over the country, all over the world in some cases, wow, have come together and connected. And even on social media, you know, we all connect, and it's just wonderful. It really is. And it is the best thing to talk and be connected with others that are going through a similar journey. And it's just wonderful.
Yeah, brilliant. It's all about the people, isn't it? And the relationships. And that's where it sounds like you've found your hope. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Have either of you got any sort of final thoughts or reflections? Anything we haven't covered? Anything else that's occurred to you? Anything else you want to say?
I think for me, I'd just like to finish off and say that living with dementia doesn't erase the potential of a fulfilling and positive life. And it doesn't. Live every moment and just enjoy.
Thank you so much, Gail. Damian, anything to add?
I can't follow that.
No. Neither can I. So I'm just going to thank you both so much. Really, really appreciate you coming. I hope that others get to watch this and, you know, catch a little bit of that hope, and a little bit of that kind of, you know, determination and energy to get out there and connect with other people and re-find their purpose. And I hope that if people are listening who run services or are writing strategies, that they are similarly inspired to rip up all their own ideas and go out there and talk to people and start afresh and build the strategy up through those kinds of groups. And obviously we'll put links in the chat as to where they can get in touch with Innovations in Dementia, Damian, and to some of the projects that you run. So yeah, hopefully people will go out there and connect. Thank you both so much.